Hey, it's Hunt. You found Hunt on Saints. We're talking black and gold football. Do us a favor. Hit the like button, share your comments below, and hit that subscription button so you can get all of our content. Enjoy.
We're going to start with the New Orleans Saints because two pretty notable free agents have actually signed deals this morning. They are both one-year deals. Going to start with Trai Turner. All you LSU fans know Trai Turner. He was an All-American at LSU, All-SEC multiple years, second-round draft pick, has been a really solid player in the NFL. Well, he's coming back to Louisiana, signing with the New Orleans Saints. It's only a one-year deal. The terms of that contract have not been released yet. We don't know what the money is. I imagine it's going to be somewhere in the $7-8 million range, probably that average for an offensive line. Look, we all know that the Saints offensive line, it needs a lot of help. I mean, basically every show on this station and every show you'll listen to, regardless of where you're at, is going to talk about one of the biggest weaknesses for this New Orleans Saints team is going to be that offensive line. And how much does Trai Turner have left in the tank? We're not sure yet, but what I can tell you is he's bringing in a ton of experience. I mean, this is a guy who's a 9-year vet. Saints fans, you remember him well. He spent the first 6 years of his career in Carolina. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler during his time in Carolina. I mean, he was instrumental in that Cam Newton offense that got him to that 15-1 record, the number 1 seed in the playoffs. You all know the story. Just big physical blocker, really known for his run blocking more than his pass blocking, but he's no slouch in the passing game as well. After he left Carolina, though, he's kind of bounced around the last 3 years. 3 different teams in the last 3 seasons. He was with the Chargers, the Steelers, and he spent some time in Washington last year. He was a starter for all 3 of those teams, but has kind of become a bit of a journeyman. Again, though, a guy who's accomplished a lot in his career, played for a Super Bowl with the Carolina Panthers, has been a 5-time Pro Bowler. He's obviously talented. He obviously brings a veteran presence that you kind of need on that offensive line, but what will his role be? Is Trai Turner an everyday starter? I'm not quite sure, but I'm kind of leaning that way. Because again, that offensive line, it's one of the biggest question marks. And what does it say about this O-line that right before training camp, you're still not comfortable with that O-line? You're going to bring in a veteran. We know that Andrus Peat cannot stay healthy. And honestly, Cesar Ruiz at the other guard spot, he's been pretty shaky, which was a weird pick to me anyways. If you guys remember, Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints, they spent a first-round pick on Cesar Ruiz when he was coming out of Michigan. And as soon as they drafted him, they said, look, he's going to be our starting center. We drafted him to play center. There was 2 issues with that. Number one, Cesar Ruiz did not play center at Michigan. He did a little bit, but he was primarily an interior offensive lineman at one of those guard spots. Secondly, the draft right before that, you just signed an Eric McCoy, who has turned into, in my opinion, one of the better, more consistent centers in the NFL. He was coming off of a good rookie year at that point. You drafted a guy in the first round for him to become that center. Needless to say, Eric McCoy has still had that spot on lock. Ruiz has been the starter at guard, and he's been a little shaky. He's been in and out of the lineup. His performance has been shaky. We don't know what his health is. We know Andrus Peat is a walking Band-Aid. I mean, that guy can't stay on the field for anything. Also, when I look at this, I got to ask, what does this mean for James Hurst and Trevor Penning? I mean, I know that Trai Turner is going to play inside at that guard spot, but let's say Turner does take one of those guard spots and he is a starter. Do you move Ruiz around? Do you move Andrus Peat around? Because that left tackle spot, it's obviously the most important spot on your offensive line, and it's been shaky. I mean, James Hurst right now is leading Trevor Penning. Trevor Penning is a guy that you drafted in the first round, couple picks next to Chris Olave to be that future left tackle. He hasn't grabbed that spot yet for whatever reason. He's been injured. He's been a little bit inconsistent. James Hurst is the leader at that spot right now, if you look at the reports coming out of camp. But, I mean, how good is James Hurst? He is a solid veteran left tackle. He's not an elite left tackle. So, I mean, could you move an Andrus Peat out? Could you move a Ruiz out and put in a Trai Turner? On the surface, this doesn't look like that big of a signing. Again, it's only a 1-year deal, but I really think it could be. Because, again, you have that veteran presence. You have another body there, if nothing else. And if he gets thrown in the starting lineup, you could mix that entire starting 5 up whichever way you want. Because as far as I'm concerned, Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle, Eric McCoy at center, All three of these spots should be up for grabs. I know everybody's talking about left tackle, but I mean, Pete can't stay on the field. Ruiz has been shaky, so we'll see what the Saints do with this signing of Trai Turner. The second signing happened about 10 minutes after Trai Turner, and this is the reason that the Trai Turner signing has kind of been overlooked. That's because the Saints have signed former All-Pro tight end and former New Orleans Saint Jimmy Graham to a one-year deal. No word yet on the amount of money in that contract. I imagine it's going to be somewhere around the veteran minimum. This is kind of a strange signing to me. Look, he was great with the Saints. We all know the numbers. He was here for 5 years. In his 5 years in New Orleans, he had over 1,200 yards receiving from the tight end position 2 different times, had double-digit receiving touchdowns twice in his 5 years here in NOLA. He wasn't just the tight end. He would line up out wide. He could line up in the slot. He could be that inline tight end that we see all the time. And, you know, he ultimately was traded out of New Orleans because of that contract dispute. If you remember, he came out and said, I'm not a tight end. I line up at receiver half the time. I want to be paid as a receiver. And Sean Payton quickly came out and was like, yo, bro, you're a tight end. We're going to pay you like a tight end. It didn't work out there. They traded him out of New Orleans, but he really fell off after he left NOLA. He has never had a 1,000-yard season since he left the Saints back in 2013. Only hit double-digit touchdowns once since his departure from the Saints. His last 1,000-yard season, it was with the Saints back in 2013. Also, he hasn't played since 2021. So he was out of the league last year. He's bounced around a little bit. If you remember when he was traded, he went to the Seattle Seahawks, played there for 3 or 4 years, went to the Packers for 2 years, played with Aaron Rodgers. People were like, oh, you know, he fell off a little bit in Seattle. Maybe bring him in with an Aaron Rodgers. Maybe give him that elite quarterback once again, see what he could do. He never really caught on there. And I made the point on the morning show, me, Mario, T-Bob, and Hester, we were all talking about this, that one of the reasons he was so successful here in New Orleans, they kind of force-fed him the ball a little bit last year, at least his time in New Orleans, at least in my opinion, because if you look at it, you had Jimmy Graham, you had Marcus Colston. Outside of that, there was a big drop-off. I mean, we pulled up the numbers on the morning show. You had 141 receptions between Pierre Thomas and Darren Sproles. Those two guys were good in the screen game, but 141 receptions out of your running back room, I mean, that right there shows the lack of weapons they had. Now, with a guy like Drew Brees, he's going to get you the ball anywhere. I mentioned earlier that he was lined up all across the field, but he was never really able to replicate that production in the other spots he went. I mentioned he last played in 2021. I actually spent 2020 and 2021 with the Chicago Bears. His performance wasn't great, however. I'm not blaming him for that, at least not entirely. We know that they've had abysmal quarterback play over the years, but in his last season with the Bears, he only appeared in about 6 games. He had 167 yards receiving with 3 touchdowns. Now, 3 touchdowns in 5 games, it's not bad, but he's had 10 touchdowns the last 2 seasons he played football. I mean, he was putting up 10, 12. 2013, he had 16 touchdowns with the Saints, so he's fallen off quite a bit. The other concern I have, Jimmy Graham's also 36 years old. How much is he going to actually play? I just mentioned that he was out of the league in 2022. What kind of shape is he in? What's his overall health look like? Is he battling an injury? He was injured a little bit his last year in Chicago. Has he fully rebounded from that? I say all that to say this. I don't see this as one of those, oh, well, Jimmy Graham's going to come in. He's going to fill that role right away. He's going to be your starting tight end. I don't see that happening. The Saints are already pretty deep at tight end. I mean, you got Jawan Johnson, the converted receiver to tight end. You know Taysom Hill's focusing more on that role. Now, he's still going to be that gadget, that Swiss Army knife player, but he's very much going to play a role in the tight end room. And then you just signed Foster Moreau, who, if fully healthy, in my opinion, might be the best tight end on your roster. I kind of feel like they signed Jimmy Graham as more of a mentor role because while you have tight ends, you don't have a ton with experience. Taysom Hill converted to tight end from another position. Jawan Johnson converted to tight end from another position. Foster Moreau, he's been a solid tight end all the way back to his days at LSU. He was great with the Raiders. He's coming off of a battle with cancer. He beat that battle, but we still don't know what it is. You know, they say he's fully healthy. We're not sure. We got to see it on the field, and he actually hasn't been in the NFL that long. I mean, he's a veteran, but he's only been there about 3 or 4 years. I think this is one of those things where you get an older guy in there. He can mentor the young guys. If you remember, Jimmy Graham was a converted basketball player. he wasn't very familiar with that tight end role before he got in New Orleans. Maybe he can help a Jawan Johnson, who really seems to be finding himself, but there is a little bit of work to be done because he played that receiver role in college. Taysom Hill, the converted quarterback, same thing. I think this is one of those kind of coach on the field type things, a mentor coming in, a veteran presence in that locker room, a guy that can really help mentor Jawan Johnson, Foster Moreau, and Taysom Hill. He may play a little bit, maybe go in there as kind of an inline blocker, maybe get some red zone work. I mean, the guy is 6'8", but as far as, his numbers, I don't see it to be anything specific. Again, I don't think it's that significant. It is a little bit of a weird signing to me because you are pretty deep at tight end, but again, it could be one of those mentor type roles. So look, the Saints have certainly been busy. We know they're about to get on the practice field for their training camp, and they're making some waves in the national media as well with two big name signings. Trai Turner, of course, the 5-time Pro Bowl guard and LSU alum, and then former New Orleans Saint and All-Pro tight end making his return to New Orleans, both of them on a 1-year deal.
Hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.